I'm Sheila. Welcome back to The Truth About Death and Dying. I like to start all my podcasts, if I remember, with a disclaimer that I'm not an expert in any field whatsoever. But I do have experience taking care of my dad when he was dying of liver cancer. And so my hope for this podcast is that if you are in that position, that you're the primary caregiver for someone that's actively dying, or perhaps you're a secondary support, or whatever your role may be, if you're watching this, I feel like, you are involved somehow with someone that's actively dying. I going through that at the time, resources can be a little weird sometimes. You have to Google things, and sometimes you get a good resource, sometimes you don't get a good resource. So that's my hope for this podcast, is that it will be a good resource of knowledge and support for you, or someone that you know that is going through this journey. So today I want to talk about accepting the truth. And let's face it, nobody wants to get bad news. Nobody is like, yeah, give me some bad news. That's what I want to hear. But knowledge is power. And so I think this is the important thing to talk about, is that when you know, even if it's the worst news in the world, you've been given a terminal illness, you're going to die, that's the worst, right? So you can either bury your head and pretend it's not true and just be in denial the whole time. And that's your choice, or the choice of the person that you may be taking care of. But the other piece to that, the other side of the coin, is that if you know that you're dying and you have a certain amount of time left, that's really powerful, in that you can utilize that time to the best of your ability. You know what you've got roughly, and doctors don't know ever, a certainty. They can give you a general idea usually, and sometimes they're on the mark, sometimes they're not. In my father's case, they gave him 6 months, and he lived 18 months after that diagnosis. So you never know. But I recently enrolled into the program to become an end-of-life doula. And my friend Christine and I had discussed this in a previous podcast. And in one of my lessons, we had to watch a video called Being Mortal. And it's a frontline documentary. You can find it on YouTube. I'm going to put the link up for you so you can find it if you want to go and watch it. And I would recommend it, because it was really well done, in that you see the doctor's perspective, you see the patient's perspectives, you see the family's perspectives of these terminal diagnoses. And the book was written by Dr. Atul Gawande. I hope I didn't hack your name, doctor, if you're watching. And he himself, his dad was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he's a doctor. His parents were both doctors, and so, he comes from at that angle. And what I found interesting, because it follows the story of several people. And in a couple of cases, the folks that had been given a terminal diagnosis, they clearly just did not want to let that sink in, of the truth of the diagnosis. So, they kind of buried their head in the sand. They just kept, and pressing on with treatments and whatnot. And it really, the end of their life, I felt very sad, because it felt like they didn't utilize the time they've been given. And I feel like, it's just, power is knowledge. Knowledge is power, Knowledge is power. So if you have that knowledge, you can take steps to, figure out how you want to live your last days, and who you want surrounding you. And, maybe you have some things on your bucket list you want to check off, and maybe you're still feeling good enough that you can do that. But if you're constantly sick with treatments and things that are just going to prolong your life but not really make it any better, which is often the case. My grandmother, who died from cancer, she was in the hospital for 11 months and on chemo virtually the whole time. And she finally told my father, she said, I'm not going to do chemo anymore, because I think it's making me sicker than the cancer. And I think that a lot of people find that. And I think that was what my father based his decision on when he got his terminal diagnosis, was he said, no, I'm just going to ride it out. I'm not going to do treatments. Whatever time I have left, I want to enjoy it. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be puking. I don't want to be putting all that other junk in my body that is not going to do anything but just maybe give me another month or two to live. And how good do you feel during that time? So I think this documentary is really important. I think everyone should watch it, honestly, because I can only imagine. I mean, I can only kind of secondary know what it feels like to hear those words like, you're going to die. You know, I heard it when my father and I sat in front of his doctor, his oncologist, and we had to hear those horrible words come out of his mouth. And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that, you know? So it's tough. But luckily, my father heard the words, and he lived the rest of his life according to his wishes, you know, and he wasn't, and I'm not trying to say don't do treatments, don't do any of this, but if you're terminal and your quality of life can be better without all that other junk and all the things that go along with chemo and dialysis and all the other things, if your life quality is going to be better without it, you know, it's just something to consider, I think, you know, but I think burying your head in the sand and thinking that there's some miracle's going to come along. Probably it's not. If the doctors are like, we've tried everything, you know. So I just wanted to stress the importance of trying to absorb that knowledge. And not just for the person that was given the diagnosis, but for family, for friends. Because I think a lot of people want to live in denial, you know. And they don't want to accept the truth of what's in front of them. And so if you can accept it, and then you can say, okay, I've got 6 months to live. Right now I'm feeling pretty good. What are there things you want to do? You want to take your, you know, kids to Disneyland, or maybe you want to go on a cruise, or what's ever on your bucket list that is still feasible to do the way you feel, then you still have a chance to knock those things off your bucket list. But if you wait and you bury your head in the sand and you're just sick and you don't feel good because you're doing chemo and all this other stuff that's just not making you feel good, I think it's time to take another look at that. That's all I'm suggesting. I'm grateful that my dad didn't bother with the chemo or anything to try to prolong, because we didn't know. He got his diagnosis in March. I thought he'd be dead by September. You know, you start figuring the months, like, oh, how long do we have? So you just never know. You just never know. And I think my dad had a really great mindset about it, and maybe that helped prolong his life. I don't know. But so I would recommend watching this documentary called Being Mortal. You can YouTube it. You just get onto YouTube and just put in Being Mortal. It's a Frontline documentary. It's about an hour long, but it's really insightful and heartbreaking, but it's definitely, I think, worth watching for everybody. Just, you know, because it is hard to accept bad news. I'm horrible at it, you know. When 9/11, when the planes were crashing, I was like, nope, I can't accept that. I can't take that into my body. I can't, my psyche can't handle that. That's just horrific. Like, you know, so I understand denying the truth about things, but if you have the knowledge, you can make better educated decisions about what's ahead, right? So anyway, that's all. I'm not going to take too long with that today. Excuse me. I just wanted to share that with you because I thought it was really important. And I hope that this helps on your journey, the journey of someone you love that is going through their, you know, end-of-life process journey. And I wish you well. It's a tough road, but reach out for support. Thank you for stopping by. I'll see you next time.